I am Matěj Skalický and this is Czech Radio News Podcast Vinohradská 12. It was supposed to last 3 days, but it has already lasted 1,000. Putin's invasion. What does life look like today on Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine? Anastasiia Panteleeva, head of the War Crimes Documentation Department at the Media Initiative for Human Rights, is today's special guest on Vinohradská 12. It's Saturday, November 23rd. Hi, Anastasia. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to join you.
How would you describe the past 1,000 days for yourself and for Ukraine?
I think these 1,000 days was the hardest in my life and in the life of modern Ukraine. I mean, after Ukraine got the independence, every day we face the violations of human rights, deaths, tortures, all these missile attacks. So this is a very hard time for our country.
Can you tell me what 1,000 days have been like for people living under the occupation of Russian Federation?
Yeah, probably for them these 1,000 days is even harder because they are limited in information, they are limited in their freedom. They hope, I know that the majority of people who stayed under the occupation, they hope to join the free part of country, but this is like they live in the constant terror and they are limited in everything. They cannot use Ukrainian, they cannot use Ukrainian passports, Ukrainian numbers on the cars. They cannot even use their own property in case they don't want to collaborate with all these new institutions, so-called, of Russians. So they are really limited in their rights and in their freedom.
Can you tell me, are the people in the occupied territories able to access some basic necessities? I mean, like energy, water, medical supplies?
If they have a Russian passport, they can have access to medical supplies. In case if we speak about those people who live far away from the front line. Mm-hmm. Near the front line, people often have no access to medical supply, to clear water. They have no heating in their houses. They often have no electricity because of these war attacks from both sides. Of course, if we speak about southern regions and if we imagine, for example, the Crimean Peninsula, we know that they have heating and medical care. But if we speak about Kherson region, for example, closer to the front line, people have nothing, almost nothing, and it's better for them to evacuate to the any site just to stay alive and to have basic medical care and so on. But if they stay far away, they can have a property, car and medical care, but only in case they want to change their citizenship and to get Russian passport. Mm-hmm. But there are some people that still have no Russian passport, but their life is pretty much limited. They stay home, they cannot get anything from the occupying government. And in case they will go outside, they can be checked by the Russian soldiers on any checkpoint. And there will be some questions. Why don't they still get the Russian passport? This is rather suspicious for Russians. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there will be some questions, some checks, and this person can be detained. Of course, they will check the phone. This is the favorite check of Russian police and Russian soldiers, and such people are in real danger.
So the life depends on two things. It's a regional thing, it's region from region, and if you're closer to the front line, the life is different than if you're further from the front line. And the second thing is if you have or you don't want to have a Russian passport.
Yes, but still, even if you have Russian passport, they can still check all your gadgets. They can still check your phone calls. With whom do you speak? To whom do you write in your messengers? You know that there are messengers that are forbidden under the occupation, such as Signal, WhatsApp. And if they find out that you still have such connection, there will be questions and probably you will be in trouble. As well as, for example, education. You cannot get Ukrainian education. I know that in some cases, you know that Ukrainian teachers from the free part of Ukraine, they can teach children online and they have to use Ukrainian program and they speak in Ukrainian. But there is almost no children under the occupation that can connect with Ukrainian teachers from the free part of Ukraine just to listen and to do tasks because this program is forbidden and it is forbidden under the occupation to speak to Ukrainian teachers, to use Ukrainian language, to do any tasks according to Ukrainian educational program. As well as it is forbidden to use, for example, Telegram channels that informs people about news in Ukraine, in the world, for example, in the United States of America and other countries. It is not forbidden only to use the neutral channels or those that use propaganda, I mean Russian propaganda.
So the people are isolated.
Yes, the people are pretty isolated, but still, I told you at the beginning that there are lots of people with pro-Ukrainian position that hope to get to Ukrainian side or that Ukraine will free them, release them from the occupants. So I heard that sometimes people can have another phone. This phone is hidden. They do not use it publicly or take it when they go outside, but still this phone can have pro-Ukrainian Telegram channels, some news, just to stay in touch with their nation, people, journalists, just to know more about what is going on in the free world.
So this is how you stay connected with those people?
No, we understand that this is very dangerous to phone to people who live under the occupation. So we try not to do this in any case. The one thing is when the person just read news from, for example, Telegram channels or from media, I mean BBC or Ukrainian channels. And another thing, when we will speak, you know that our focus of our organization is human rights violations. So if we will phone the person and we will ask whether you were tortured or whether your phone was checked or such questions about the detention, it is very dangerous. And they can hear this because they have special technical supplies to hear what is going on in the occupation, what about people talking with the help of phones. So we never do this.
But you have some ways how to gather updates on their situation.
Through their relatives, or some people phone us, they just get this responsibility on themselves. But this is the minority of people, fortunately, because it's really dangerous. And of course, we monitor open sources, all the open sources, I mean those with propaganda, those that Russians created, all these Telegram channels, all these websites where they write about the news in occupation, about how they detain Ukrainians, how they accuse them in any crimes. So we monitor this information, and in case these people or their relatives will leave the occupation, we will connect with them, and of course we will interview them and help them to get to the governmental institutions.
So you get a pretty good picture of what's going on.
Yes, because we also interview people that get out from the occupation. And we ask them all these questions about human rights violations, about what they have seen and what they have felt. So yes, of course we have.
How hard is for them to leave these regions?
It is very hard because if we speak about southern regions, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, there were some like green corridors or so-called green corridors because it still was dangerous. And the people from the occupied territories, they can get from one region to another, I mean, from the occupied region to the deoccupied region or to non-occupied. But now Russians, they closed all these ways to get out directly, and people from the occupied territories have to go through Russian territory and sometimes, in some cases, through some territories of the EU countries to get to Ukraine. Such road can take 10, 11 days. And these people are checked on every checkpoints, up to 40 checkpoints. Russians ask them different questions, whether they have Russian passports, if no, why? Do they support Zelensky? Do they support different European institutions? What about their religious view or thoughts? What about their family? Are there any members of the family that can be Ukrainian soldiers? And so on. So it's very exhausting. It's very nervous travel back home, but still people come back.
I have to ask you, we recently covered the tragic death of journalist Viktoria Roshchina, who made repeated attempts to report from within occupied regions. It's highly dangerous to go there. It's nearly impossible for journalists to go there and enter those regions. Are you aware of others who made similar efforts and attempts?
No, I have never heard about others. It's really very dangerous, and so we know less about her way, how she got there. We only know that she was detained, and this is a rather usual story. But for the beginning of the occupation, because, after the full-scale invasion, Russians detain journalists, activists, all these people who can, influence the society. Victoria went to the occupied territory after this wave of detention of these people, activists and journalists. Of course, she knew that it is very dangerous because we have Dmitry Khluk, who was detained at the beginning of the occupation from Kyiv region. He's still in captivity, so-called. We have other journalists from Melitopol that are still being somewhere in Russian prisons. So, of course, she knew that this is dangerous, but probably she had something to do to show to her readers.
Let's take it from the Russian viewpoint or perspective for a moment. Does Russia currently consider all Ukrainians in the occupied territories to be Russian citizens?
They included these regions into their constitution, but still, I don't know what do they think about this. I think that those who took their passport, Russian passports, they consider to be Russian citizens. But those who didn't, probably no, but they try to push them to do this.
To ask for a Russian citizenship, to have Russian passports, they push them to do that.
Yeah. But still, I think that they do not feel like those, even with Russian passports, those people are Russians. They are suspicious to such people. They do not like them because they know that Ukrainians want their life back. Even with Russian passports.
Yeah, I get it. But do they move some parts of their population, the Russian population, to the occupied regions? Yeah,
they moved. They moved them from the very beginning. We know that in Kherson, when it was still occupied, they moved Russian doctors to the hospitals in Kherson. They tried to move teachers. Of course, they move all these policemen and such governmental different workers. So, and these people who work for a year or two, of course, they try to move their families. If we speak about Mariupol, they moved different workers that build new buildings. So, of course, they try to do that.
Are young Ukrainians being recruited into the Russian army?
Yeah, they try to do this. The last news that I read the local media in Kherson regions that 2 men, they hanged like they killed themselves because Russians tried to recruit them to the Russian army. And I can imagine what was the methods to do this. And these two men, they were previously soldiers of Ukrainian army. I mean, before the full-scale invasion. So they like veterans. Of course, this is a hard story. And yeah, they try to do this. But still, they think that the Ukrainians are suspicious. So I hope that they will not make it in the majority of cities and villages.
One more question about the Russian perspective. Is it still true that Russian forces are abducting Ukrainian children and deporting them to Russia?
Yeah, they deported lots of orphanages at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, but still, there are different situations. Sometimes the relatives can be dead, and they deport such children. They find all these families that have, problems, and they try to deport these children to Russian side. This is really, we have the case where there was a little girl. Her mom was dead. Unfortunately, she died of some illness probably. And her dad was kidnapped by Russians. He is on the Russian territory now, and he is a civilian, detainee. And we don't know where they moved the girl, but probably they put her in the orphanage somewhere on the Russian territory.
And they want them to start learning Russian, right?
Yeah, of course. They want all children, even those that have relatives and parents, to
Russificate them.
Yeah, to Russificate. They use only Russian program. They have no Ukrainian in their program. It is even forbidden to use Ukrainian. We have lots of cases when they beat people, detain them because they use Ukrainian language.
You've said that there are a lot of people who want to escape those territories. Is there any form of resistance among locals? And could it be?
Yeah, there is a yellow stripe. This is a famous movement of people that are pro-Ukrainian. They try to put the yellow stripe on trees, or they write on the ground or somewhere on the stones, or just they call on people in the occupation to hope and to believe that Ukraine will be here soon. Yeah.
Very harsh winter is coming. It's gonna be maybe the most difficult winter since the full-scale invasion. So do Ukrainians in the occupied regions still believe that the situation can change? And how are they prepared for winter?
Of course, Ukrainians believe that something will change. They believe that the world will pay attention to the situation and will help our country to resist and to get back our territories together with our people, children. This is a very important question, and it is really a huge hope of people on the occupied territories. And if we speak about the winter, the previous winter was rather hard for people on the occupied territories because there were a lot of problems with electricity, and there were a lot of problems with water after the attack on Kakhovska Dam. People somehow managed to stay alive. They use fires outside houses, and they just to cook their food for them. They use different alternative ways of heating their flats and houses. Of course, if we speak not about the regions near the front line, because in such regions the situation is very hard. Fortunately, there are not so many people on these territories, but still there are some, especially those that are retired, and Ukraine try to evacuate them if we have the access to such territories. But unfortunately, there are some territories that are occupied very quickly, so we have no access to these people. And I'm afraid that some can die, really. We see these videos and photos how Russia occupies these villages, and there are lots of civilians that are lying on the roads, just killed. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Anastasia, for your time that you found for talking about this.
Thank you as well. Thank you.
And that's all for today. I spoke with Anastasiia Panteleeva, head of the War Crimes Documentation Department at the Media Initiative for Human Rights. Thank you for listening.